In 2022, Vince McMahon walked onto live television the same week he was accused of paying millions in hush money to former employees.
Vince McMahon, I own my own competition.
The crowd gave him a standing ovation, not because they supported the allegations, not because they misunderstood the story, but because WWE had spent 40 years training audiences to respond to human catastrophe the same way they respond to a surprise Royal Rumble entrant, with noise, with excitement, with zero questions. That's the machine Vince McMahon built, a company that took scripted violence and somehow made the real-life scandals more theatrical than anything happening inside the ring. Steroid trials, dead wrestlers, federal investigations, a corporate culture that sounds less like a sports entertainment company and more like the deleted subplot from a Scorsese film that was cut for being too on the nose. And through all of it, WWE just kept selling foam fingers and commemorative belts to children. Because wrestling was never the product. Wrestling was the delivery system. What WWE actually sold was the complete suspension of reality. Packaged as family entertainment. It convinced millions of people that a billionaire in a suit was the hero of a working class story. That the chaos on screen had nothing to do with the chaos happening backstage. It was the greatest long con in American entertainment history. WWE began the way all healthy global entertainment monopolies begin, with regional wrestling promoters yelling at each other in smoke-filled arenas while pretending a man named Crusher had just suffered a life-threatening injury from an elbow drop. Back in the 1950s and 60s, professional wrestling in America was organized like medieval Europe. Tiny territories, local kings, everyone staying in their lane, cross-territorial lines uninvited, and promoters reacted like you'd invaded Poland. Then Vince McMahon Jr. arrived in 1982 carrying two things, a national expansion plan and the moral restraint of a cocaine hurricane. Most promoters saw wrestling as a regional attraction. Vince looked at Hulk Hogan and saw the Marvel Cinematic Universe before Marvel even knew what a cinematic universe was. He started rating rival promotions for talent, ignoring the unwritten rules that had kept wrestling stable for decades. From a business perspective, it was genius. From an ethical perspective, it had the energy of a man flipping over the Monopoly board because he just discovered hostile acquisitions. WrestleMania in 1985 is where everything changed. Celebrities, MTV cross-promotion,
simulcast of our fans in WWF New York, our fans around the world.
Mr. T, Cyndi Lauper, pyrotechnics loud enough to register as a diplomatic incident. Suddenly, WWE wasn't competing with other wrestling promotions anymore. It was competing with movies, music, and live sports simultaneously, and somehow winning. By the late 80s, WWE had become less of a company and more of a factory for American excess. Every wrestler looked chemically assembled in a laboratory underneath a Gold's Gym. Storylines got bigger, muscles got bigger, scandals got bigger. Because behind all the patriotism and body slams, something else was growing inside WWE at industrial speed. A culture where image mattered more than reality.
Not a raucous reception.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And eventually reality started demanding its money back. The first real warning sign appeared when people noticed that WWE's roster looked less like a group of athletes and more like a biology teacher's PowerPoint on the dangers of anabolic steroids. By the early 1990s, WWE was printing money. Hulk Hogan was on cereal boxes. Parents trusted the product. Meanwhile, backstage, wrestlers were allegedly cycling through enough performance-enhancing substances to disqualify an entire Olympic Games. In 1991, WWE Dr. George Zahorian was convicted of illegally distributing steroids to dozens of wrestlers, shipping them directly to WWE headquarters via FedEx, like a very illegal Amazon subscription. The owner of America's most family-friendly wrestling promotion was now connected to a federal drug conviction. Then Vince McMahon himself was indicted in 1993 and stood trial in 1994. He was acquitted on all charges, and WWE didn't just survive, it evolved. Because the company discovered something important. Controversy made the product feel dangerous.
Tag team partners last week, but not a lot of continuity between those two, quite frankly.
More real, more alive. Fans weren't switching off because things got messy backstage. If anything, the ugliness made WWE more compelling to watch. which is exactly why the Montreal Screwjob in 1997 became the most important moment in wrestling history for all the wrong reasons. Bret Hart was leaving WWE for rival promotion WCW. He refused to lose the championship on Canadian soil, so Vince McMahon secretly ordered the referee to end the match while Hart was still fighting, blindsiding him on live television in front of his home country. Hart spat in Vince's face backstage. The wrestling world melted down, and WWE's ratings went up. The lesson WWE took from Montreal was the most dangerous one it could have learned. Blurring the line between fiction and reality doesn't hurt the product. It supercharges it.
And he can't hide from the fact there ain't a damn thing that he can do about it.
That lesson fueled the Attitude Era, and for a few years, it genuinely felt like WWE had cracked the code. Stone Cold Steve Austin assaulted his boss with a beer truck on live television and became the most popular wrestler in history. The Rock delivered verbal destruction so precise it felt genuinely dangerous. Ratings exploded. WWE crushed rival promotion WCW and absorbed what was left of it by 2001. Vince McMahon had won the wrestling war so completely that there was no war left to fight. But winning everything comes with a cost nobody talks about, because the company also internalized one operating principle above everything else. Escalation fixes everything. Ratings dropping? Push further. Need headlines? Get more offensive. Losing attention? Make the spectacle bigger. That philosophy works beautifully right up until reality stops cooperating.
Can you believe this? I mean, what else we can see? You got Kurt Angle tapping out.
In 2007, Chris Benoit murdered his wife, strangled his 7-year-old son, and hanged himself, all over the course of a single weekend. He was 40 years old. When doctors examined his brain afterward, they found damage so severe it resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient, a man who had entertained millions by taking unprotected chair shots to the skull. For 2 decades had essentially destroyed his own mind in front of a paying audience. Every steel chair shot people had cheered for suddenly looked completely different. The accumulated physical cost of performing in WWE, the concussions, the painkiller dependency, the relentless travel schedule, was no longer an abstract concern. It was a crime scene. WWE responded by going PG, cleaner programming, family-friendly rebranding. They stopped chair shots to the head, started talking about wellness, and generally behaved like a company that had learned something.
Is a Doink the Clown, who is here tonight. There you see Doink in the sold-out Gun Arena crowd.
But structurally, almost nothing changed. Wrestlers remained classified as independent contractors despite working schedules that would make an Amazon warehouse employee file a humanitarian complaint. WWE had spent 20 years building a company that didn't know how to stop, so it didn't. Then social media arrived and took away the last thing WWE had always relied on: narrative control. Reddit threads dissected backstage politics with the rigor of FBI case files. Old footage resurfaced within hours. Botches became memes before the show even ended. Entire YouTube channels built sustainable audiences explaining in detail why the main product had creatively collapsed. Some of them were genuinely more entertaining than Raw. And WWE had no answer for any of it, because for 40 years the company had never needed one.
To see the Rock Stone Cold for the WWF title.
Then 2022 arrived, and everything WWE had buried started coming back up. The Wall Street Journal reported that Vince McMahon had paid roughly $3 million in hush money to a former employee named Janelle Grant, a paralegal in WWE's legal department who accused McMahon of making her employment contingent on a sexual relationship with him. More NDAs surfaced involving other women. The WWE board launched an investigation. Vince stepped down as CEO, then appeared on live television the same night, smiling with the energy of a man who genuinely believed a federal investigation was just another angle he could work. The crowd cheered. He officially retired in July 2022, then returned as executive chairman in January 2023 to oversee WWE's merger with UFC into TKO Group Holdings.
Steven Richards, and watch this, the tag mission, the cut to Hajime, and the
because apparently retiring only counts if there isn't a billion-dollar deal on the table. Then in January 2024, Grant filed a formal federal lawsuit. The allegations included sexual assault, coercion, and trafficking. The Department of Justice opened its own investigation, serious enough that they asked Grant to pause her civil case while federal prosecutors worked. McMahon resigned from TKO the same week. This was no longer a tabloid story about a controversial billionaire. This was potentially criminal conduct on a scale that made the steroid trial look like a parking violation. For the first time in 40 years, WWE faced a problem that couldn't be scripted away. Because once audiences started asking whether the entire culture was rotten underneath the spectacle, the fantasy didn't just wobble, it started collapsing from the inside. The reason WWE feels strange today isn't because wrestling stopped being popular. It's because the company perfected its business model so completely that it accidentally removed the thing people loved about wrestling in the first place: unpredictability. Modern WWE is less a wrestling promotion and more a content refinery. Everything is optimized.
Buzz on what's going through their minds right now.
You know, Coach, now is just not a good time, okay?
Every promo is polished. Every feud gets stretched across sponsorship deals, documentaries, and endless recap packages before anyone actually throws a punch. Wrestlers don't sound like unstable maniacs anymore. They sound like media-trained startup founders explaining company culture during a layoffs announcement. And that's not entirely Vince McMahon's fault. It's what happens when a counterculture becomes a corporation. WWE is now a publicly traded entertainment brand merged into TKO Group Holdings alongside the UFC. The company has shareholders. You can practically hear the legal department breathing through every segment. Even the presentation feels corporate. Giant LED stages, endless sponsorships, commentary that sounds less like people reacting to violence and more like HR representatives trying to survive a hostage situation. Michael Cole will be screaming about a historic WrestleMania moment while simultaneously promoting a phone company as a man dressed like a medieval warlord gets launched through a table behind him. And despite the production getting bigger, the product somehow feels smaller. Modern WWE constantly references its own past because nostalgia is safer than creating something new.
155 pounds is already on the shelf, and he's no pushover.
Why gamble on building the next Stone Cold when you can just play Stone Cold's entrance music again and watch 40-year-old men experience temporary spiritual enlightenment next to a nacho stand? That's why so much of modern WWE feels weirdly hollow, even when the stadiums are full. WrestleMania still looks enormous, but emotionally, it feels like a tribute band performing covers of its own history. The old problems never disappeared either. Wrestlers are still classified as independent contractors despite schedules that would concern an employment attorney.
Look, I don't care what I said. I don't give a damn what. How could you let that happen? How could you possibly let that happen?
The travel is brutal. The physical toll is brutal. WWE cleaned up the optics. The exhaustion stayed, just with better lighting. And then there's the Triple H problem. Not because Triple H is doing a bad job. Fans genuinely like the shows more now. Promos breathe longer. Wrestlers sound more human. But that improvement accidentally raises a horrifying possibility. Vince may have spent the final years of his career actively making WWE worse while believing he was saving it. Which means the most unpredictable part of WWE was never the wrestling. It was the man running it. Here's what makes WWE's story genuinely strange. Underneath every scandal, every lawsuit, every hush money payment, and federal investigation, there actually was something real there. For a few decades, WWE understood spectacle better than almost any entertainment company on the planet. Entire generations hear Stone Cold's glass shatter or The Rock say, "Finally," and immediately become 14 years old again. That kind of cultural imprint doesn't happen by accident. It requires genuine craft and genuine belief in what you're selling.
It's actually happening.
Oh, is that so? Is that so? How dare you?
But WWE also became the clearest example of what happens when success removes every incentive for self-reflection. The company survived so many controversies that it started treating survival as proof of innocence. Problems stopped getting solved and started getting managed, suppressed with NDAs, absorbed into earnings calls, buried under the next WrestleMania announcement. WWE isn't dead. The Netflix deal is enormous. WrestleMania still fills stadiums. Under Triple H, the shows are genuinely better. The machine still runs. But here's what's different now. A former employee is in federal court describing what allegedly happened behind locked doors at WWE headquarters. The Department of Justice opened its own investigation. And Vince McMahon, the man who built all of this, who survived steroid trials and sex scandals and congressional scrutiny, is currently dealing with something his 40 years of narrative control couldn't prepare him for, a story he can't book his way out of. WWE spent 40 years asking audiences to suspend disbelief. Turns out the most unbelievable part was never the man in the cape getting hit with a folding chair. It was the man in the suit watching from ringside. Subscribe, hit the bell, and if Vince McMahon somehow books his way out of a federal investigation, we'll be the first to cover it.